Okay, it's week 10. 10, double digits. That feels like a little bit of a milestone to me. Week 10 of exposure. And this last week was really one of the most wonderful weeks of my life, and also one of the most heartbreaking weeks of my life. It was Thanksgiving week. And Thanksgiving has always been a precious holiday for me. It's a time of gathering with family, with my growing family. Well, not my growing family, but the growing family. My family, which comprises my parents, my siblings, their in-laws, and the growing part, my nephews and nieces. There are now 5, though there hasn't been much growth in recent years. The youngest is now 8. But there is a new addition to this family in a way, which is my partner, Anna. In fact, last Thanksgiving, was the first time she met everyone. And it was great. It was great last Thanksgiving. But there was also, I had a degree of concern I wasn't worried. She's an incredibly charming person and a very socially, I'd say even gifted person. I mean, just everyone falls in love with her. But, she was coming in as a new person in a family where the newest other adult would be my sister-in-law, and she's been married to my brother. I mean, they've been together, I think, 20 years at this point. So, but this one felt different. This one, I don't know why it felt different. I guess because things feel very different with Anna and I. They feel, just perfect, honestly. Dangerous word to use, perfect, because of course perfection never lasts. But things could not be better. I mean that literally. I can't imagine things being better than they are right now with Anna. Yeah, it's just, there's a magic there. It's the magic of being totally in love, and just, there's no issues with this relationship at this point. Which isn't to say that they're not going to come back, but we've worked through a lot of stuff. We're both fully committed. We're totally in love. And just the basic joy we take in one another's presence, even when things aren't always easy, is, it's incredibly sweet. And things have been very easy recently. And we were going into Thanksgiving on sort of a high note, though a high note that I think it feels, so we've been together now, Anna and I, for a year and a half, and I keep thinking like, okay, the honeymoon period has to be ending, but it doesn't seem to be ending. In fact, it seems to be intensifying. By honeymoon period, I mean the intense physical high of being in love. But it's not just that intense physical high of being in love. There's just a deep trust, respect, understanding. We know each other increasingly well, of course. And so, I don't know why, but this year, this Thanksgiving, I think, that was part of why, the reasons I just mentioned, but part of it seemed to go beyond that. It felt like she was part of the family. And this was what I'd wanted for so long, because Thanksgiving has always been a very sweet holiday for me, because I am close with my family, very close with my family. Not that there's not sometimes conflict, of course, but we're very close. And it's one of the 2 or 3 times a year where we all gather. And over the years, we've evolved different customs. We have a talent show for the kids, my nephews and nieces, now ranging in age from 8 to 14. And we enjoy each other's company. And that's a very sweet thing. And I think a rare thing to really just appreciate and treasure being around one another. And so Thanksgiving has always been sweet, but for many years, my experience has been, it's been tinged with also this feeling of, I wish I had someone. Because my parents have each other. My brother has his wife. My sister has her husband. They have their own sub-families. Whereas me, I'm just the solo dude. And everyone makes me feel totally included. I never feel left out, but there are these moments, particularly towards the end of the night, we're all hanging out by the fire. And then my sister and brother-in-law will go to sleep. And I'm aware that they're now going into their own little pod to share their experiences with each other. So I fantasized about this. Of course I have. And this was better than the fantasy. Part of it was the place we went. So we've always had Thanksgiving at my parents' house. But this year we decided to go to the place we've been going recently for summer vacations, which is a house on the ocean, the North Shore of Massachusetts. And it's an interesting place. One of the reviews on VRBO referred to it as downtown shabby. It actually used to be like a Gilded Age mansion there. And it was demolished or greatly reduced, I think, in the 50s. So it's not a small house, but it's certainly not a huge house. But the setting, and it's a little bit dilapidated, run down. Yeah, the mattresses are lumpy and uncomfortable. The windows are drafty. The rugs are very threadbare. But the location is spectacular. It's on a private beach. I mean, how lucky are we to have this place? And so we decided to go for Thanksgiving this year. And I had some anxiety leading up to it because I have anxiety about any change. And Thanksgiving is always sweet at my parents' place. And I was kind of like, oh, why are we even doing this? It's just going to be a hassle getting there. But it was great. It added this other dimension because in addition to all hanging out at the house, we could go for walks on the beach. And yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to summarize it. Well, no, I guess what I'm struggling with is so this is exposure. And if this is not your first time, you'll know what I'm about to say, which is the idea is this is an exposure for my OCD perfectionism by putting out an imperfect video. And where my mind is going right now is, well, this isn't interesting. I'm just talking about how wonderful everything is. But whatever. Good. If this isn't interesting, it's a better exposure. So yeah, it was beautiful. We had beautiful weather. It was cold. We went swimming. We did these polar bear swims on Thanksgiving and the next day. The kids running around on the beach, and then retreating to the living room and the fire and just spending hours there. And it was exactly the experience I'd imagined it would be like. Sharing with everyone, with the family, joking, laughing, talking, and then also sharing with Anna alone. And yeah. I'm saying yeah a lot, I guess, because I'm just reflecting. And all right, yeah, wow. I'm really feeling like this just fucking sucks. This video sucks. Good. Let's continue. So it was 3 days with Anna there, and just and this feeling of like, God, I want this to last forever. No real anxiety. Feeling like nothing is lacking, like I have everything I need here. And because I think I did have everything I need, because one thing that I think I need, I know I need, and I think we all need, that I really deprived myself of for so many years was a lot of human connection. For so many of our family vacations, the experience would be, we'd be on vacation, but, I'd be going off alone for hours every day to go hiking alone. And, deprive myself. I mean, this was in the aftermath of this great heartbreak I had 20 years ago where I developed OCD, and I think it felt safer being alone because the biggest source of uncertainty is other people. Even people who you love, even people who you trust, like family members. In some way, it felt safer being alone and being in my own world and being able to control everything. And nature, one of the things that's addictive for me about nature is I never really feel lonely in nature. I can be acutely aware of my loneliness if I'm in an apartment alone. But in nature, I don't feel alone because I feel, it's a cliche, but I feel this viscerally. It feels like, oh, I'm part of this bigger context, the trees, the ocean, the mountains. I'm not alone. But yeah, I'm glad that I don't do that anymore, that now when I'm with the family, I really enjoy being with the family, but it was made easier by having Anna there, by having my own little connection there. And wow, I'm really struggling with this one. Week 10. These have gotten generally pretty easy for me. I just kind of talk and don't worry about it. But this one, all right. Yeah, I guess there's not much more to say about this. It was an incredible, magical, perfect week. I'll try to summarize some of the moments. Just the Thanksgiving meal, the sunshine pouring through the windows of this house. Because when we're there in the summer, of course, the sun is higher in the sky. Now, being closer to the horizon, you just get this light pouring in through these windows facing the ocean. The sound of the surf, the most comforting sound in the world for me. Falling asleep to that sound every night with Anna next to me. Feeling like, I have everything I need. This is what I want. And also having some moments of, I should say, of insecurity. Because one of the parts I connected to in IFS, maybe about a year ago, Internal Family Systems, the therapy that I've been doing for a couple of years, though I don't do it with a therapist anymore. I do it on my own, but IFS, essentially parts work. I won't summarize it here. You can look it up. But I became aware about a year ago of this part that really assumes that people don't like me. And I think part of that is rooted in the fact that as a kid, I caused my family a great deal of pain because I couldn't manage my emotions. I was often in a state of crisis, of just deep, deep distress. And yeah, I was the squeaky wheel in this family. I was the one who I think maybe suffered the most, but certainly caused the most suffering. And so, yeah, if there's this part that feels that people don't like me, it also kind of feels like, well, they're kind of justified in not liking me because I made them suffer. And I know they love me. And I think even then I felt loved, but this can come up. And of course, there's this desire, I say, of course, I'll get to the of course part in a moment, to win people over, which I think is why I do stand up, or at least was the initial motivation. There's something about human interaction which is, I think, ultimately flummoxing to me. And I think it's because when you're interacting with someone, there's always this uncertainty. You don't know quite what their experience is, except in comedy, you know that they like you because they are laughing. And even before I started doing comedy, a big social strategy of mine was making people laugh so that I felt secure, I felt liked. And I certainly can do that with the family. And so that came up at times. But I shared it with Anna, and she helped me gain new clarity around it, and that brought us closer together. Yeah, I didn't want it to end. And I guess that's the pain whenever anything is wonderful. There's an incredible, just incredibly helpful and illuminating video on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, stop watching me right now. And look it up afterwards. Grief and Praise, Martin Prechtel. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. I don't even know how to describe this guy. A shaman, maybe. Someone who's undergone great personal suffering and has great wisdom. And in this talk, Grief and Praise, he says how basically whenever we praise something, whenever we appreciate something, there's grief in that because we're going to lose it. Because we lose everything ultimately. And whenever we're grieving something, there's praise in that. We wouldn't grieve the loss of something if we hadn't loved it, if we weren't praising it in some way. And this really hit home for me our last day there when I didn't want to leave. And I was like, well, yeah, as much as I love this, so there is a proportionate pain around the fact that I'm not always going to be here. And I can also apply that to Anna. When things have been challenging in the relationship, of course, there's not much fear of loss. There's some. But when things are perfect, I mean, they can't be this perfect forever. Of course they can't be this perfect forever. And so there's a fear of losing it. But what I've been able to do is just kind of be present with it. Yeah. Not try to fix it, not try to figure it out, not try to reassure myself it's always going to be this good, not try to reassure myself I'm not going to lose her. But yeah, that was the sweetness, was Anna and Anna in the context of the whole family. The heartbreak was my father, who has Alzheimer's. I've talked about it before. Not terribly advanced, but a huge difference. I mean, he's still himself, but you can't have a deep conversation with him. And yeah, he was just this incredibly robust person. I mean, as recently as 5 years ago, he'd bike back and forth to work. And 10 years ago, he'd run back and forth to work. And just someone who just boundless energy. And now he has become a frail, increasingly feeble old man. The only consolation there is, I think, a good deal of the time, I don't think he's so aware of it, but he is aware of it a good deal of the time. And we're aware of it. I mean, he's someone who everyone takes pains to include him, of course. And he is included, and he does participate in conversation, but much less. He's, somewhat sidelined. I don't know, I wasn't thinking about it much, and I still enjoy his company, as I've shared before, very much so. And I was enjoying his company there, going for walks on the beach with him. But our last night there, and Anna had left the night before our last night to visit some friends, some very close friends she hadn't seen in a year. We're all sitting around the fire, and we're having a conversation about the youth hockey league my sister and brother-in-law's kids is in. It wasn't like a terribly riveting conversation. The sort of conversation you have because it's enjoyable talking with people, and the content is almost secondary. But we're kind of getting into the minutia of this league, and my father says, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And he said it in a joking tone, but it just fucking broke my heart. Yeah. And it just brought home what it has been brought home repeatedly for me, but I guess I keep forgetting it or not thinking about it all the time. And maybe there's not a point in thinking about it all the time, which is, his experience. I don't know what his experience is like, but I think a lot of the time he's there kind of somewhat checked out, not really knowing what people are talking about. The next day we left, and my father was not in a very good mood. This is the other thing about him, is some days he's in a good mood, and some days he's not in a good mood, and there's no obvious pattern that I or my mother has been able to discern. And he just wasn't in a very good mood, and he was just kind of quiet, a little bit morose, and but one of the activities, so there's a few activities that I really enjoy doing with my father. We can't have the deep conversations. Going for walks, excuse me, watching movies, carefully selected movies that don't have intricate plots. But one thing that's really a special pleasure for us is watching Celtics games together. They live in the Boston area. And so it was a Celtics game, and I was looking forward to watching it with him. But he just wasn't really present with me. He was watching the game, and I kept trying to, kind of draw him into conversation. Limited conversations, but like being like, is Tatum or whatever, he's still the best player on the Celtics, right? Or, I don't remember exactly, but little things that were happening in the game, and I would kind of try to bring him in. And he'd respond, but fairly perfunctorily. And it just hit me at a certain point, part of why I enjoy watching things with my father is it's twofold. One, I enjoy connecting with him through this medium that we can share. And two, I feel like it's good for him, because if I wasn't there watching with him, he would be there alone. But on this night, it felt to me like we might as well have just been watching alone. And I just was aware of this, I'm like the son trying to kind of connect with his daddy. It felt like there was something very young about me in that moment, just trying to get his attention, not because he's neglectful, but, but really I was trying to cheer him up too. And after that, I went downstairs to my room, and I started thinking that maybe I should change my plane ticket and go back to San Francisco earlier. Thanksgiving obviously was a Thursday, that was a Sunday, and I was supposed to go back to San Francisco on a Thursday, 1 week after Thanksgiving, and I started thinking maybe I should go back earlier. Maybe I should go back, which is a thought that had occurred to me before because I wanted to be in San Francisco with Anna. And I'm going to go back to my family's place for the holidays. I'll be there for almost 3 weeks. But yeah, it kicked in strongly, and of course it did. And so for new viewers, this is my OCD dramatically better, but it's decision-making OCD. And one of the things that historically has been the biggest, maybe the biggest trigger for me, has been decisions about travel. And often the way this can play out is canceling and basically changing my travel plans, trying to optimize. And so recovery for me is just stick with your plane ticket no matter what. Just don't change it. But I was just feeling pretty wretched, lonely, and isolated, and wanting to be with Anna. And yeah, I started going down that rabbit hole and looking at tickets, and it wasn't prohibitively expensive to change my ticket, but also why not stay here for a few days? And it was somewhat more expensive, and then I'd have to change the rental car. And I guess I will mark this as recovery, though, because I did change my ticket, but I didn't obsess. In the past, I could have gone literally all night. But I bought a ticket that night, a cancelable ticket, due to Orbitz's generous, though in my case, enabling 24-hour courtesy cancellation policy, and went to sleep. But I didn't sleep well, because I had kind of ramped up my brain into this obsessive state. And yeah, and I woke up the next morning and was still unsure about the decision, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to leave today. And it felt, as soon as I made that decision, it felt so wrong. So wrong. And this is how I know it's OCD. And this also is how I know I'm on the path to recovery, is when something feels really, really wrong, that's a good sign that you should stick with it. And again, in hindsight, probably the most recovery-oriented thing I could have done would have been to stick with my original ticket and not changed it, because it felt really wrong the night before. But now that I changed it, that felt really, really wrong. Why am I spending this extra money when I don't have a lot of money? And what's another 3 days here? And yeah, and I was sitting there trying to meditate and being acutely aware of the sun coming in the window. So if you can't tell, I have kind of an obsession with sunlight. And I love the winter sun coming in near horizontally through windows in the Northeast. And it was a beautiful day. And I was like, why am I changing my ticket? Because I checked the weather. Of course, it was going to be nice the next 3 days and sunny. And I could just have this time at my parents' place where it's comfortable. And, I can connect with my father, even if it's not what I want, ultimately. I mean, not what, even if it's not quite the way I want it to be. But no, I stuck with it. And it felt wrong. Oh, and I didn't record this. That morning, I just started sobbing. And thank God, because I hadn't had a good cry in, I think, a couple of months. And I was just crying about my father and about my mother. That morning, I saw my mother and I said, yeah, it's what did I say? Something to the effect of, sometimes it's hard to not be depressed seeing Dad like this. And she said, yeah, this is my life. And when she said this, my initial reaction is often what it is when my mother shares her pain with me, which is there's this little rush of anger. Like, I don't want her to share it with me. But I've encouraged her to share it with me. I've opened the door wide because I want her to share it with me. Because for two reasons. One, she needs to share it more widely. I mean, what she's dealing with is an incomprehensible burden. Your partner of 55 years suddenly transforming so that he's no longer a partner, so that he's someone who you have to take care of, and someone who resents you for taking care of him, and it can often be quite mean to her. What a horrific, horrific, horrific thing. But the other reason I wanted to share with me is I realize, in ways I can't quite articulate, that this is a way for us to heal our relationship. We have a very good relationship now, but when I was growing up, we had an extremely contentious relationship. And maybe heal is overstating it. Maybe there's not much that needs to be healed at this point, but it's a way at this point, but it's a way of deepening our relationship, and I want to deepen our relationship. Because one thing this Thanksgiving made me very aware of is time, and how much time I've lost. Lost is a heavy word, and maybe not accurate. I mean, time proceeds, and we have experiences. You can't really lose time, but yeah, it occurred to me being with Anna and my family on this Thanksgiving, it occurred to me that maybe it felt a little bit like, say, an alcoholic who finally gets sober and just has a much, much better life. And there's great joy in that. But there's also sorrow because, man, why didn't they get sober 20 years prior? All those years are lost. And I see this now. And that was part of my awareness too, is by the time my father was my age, I was 20. I was 21. If I have kids now, which is something Anna and I talk about, yeah, I mean, it's a very different experience having kids in middle age versus, in your 20s. And yeah, and as wonderful as this Thanksgiving was, so many past Thanksgivings could have been like this, but maybe they couldn't have been like this. When I've shared this sentiment with Anna, like I've lost so much time, she says, yeah, but you wouldn't be with me now if it wasn't for all those experiences. And for all the women in the 20 years that I was effectively single, I mean, I had relationships, but not a deep partnership like this, I think of all these women who I didn't really give a chance in hindsight. And yeah, I'm sure if some of them, if I'd opened my heart to them, we could have had a deeper connection and maybe a lifetime commitment and a family. But none of them, I don't think I could have what I have with Anna. So I'm grateful. I'm deeply grateful for where things are at and the way things have evolved. But that time, that's the one thing I can't get back. And so when I think about getting closer to my mother, yeah, part of it is, it's for the first time it's really starting to hit me that my time with them is limited. Could be less than a decade, easily. Actuarially, probably is less than a decade, based on their current ages. So, but yeah, when she shared with me that morning that, like, this is what my life is like, again, this wasn't a new realization, but it just hit me. And I went to my room and I just sobbed, a long, hard 5-minute sob. Sobbing for her, sobbing for myself, and sobbing for him. And just the fucking unfairness of it. I think that's another thing that I'm losing with this, is this very juvenile sense of the world. Because I think I have harbored this belief in that the world is fair in some way. I mean, intellectually, I know it's not. I know horrible things happen to undeserving people and wonderful things happen to equally undeserving people. But my own experience of life has been, I think, unusually soft in some ways. Let me be specific. I'm 49 and I haven't lost anyone very close to me except my grandmother. And I lost her when she was 94. And yeah, I've had a lot of love in my life. I have an incredible family. I've struggled massively with, emotional challenges. But I've also been able to get support. And I've had, I'll say, a pretty fucking remarkable recovery, which I've worked really hard for and I continue to work really hard for. But I'm also aware that this was facilitated by, having people around me to support me. Having the ability to pay for therapy. So I feel tremendously lucky. In fact, I think one of the biggest questions I wouldn't say I've struggled with it because there's no answer, but why am I so lucky? And so I think because of this, even though intellectually I know that things are unfair, viscerally it feels to me like, yeah, there is a sense of fairness in the world. And I think I've clung to this too. I mean, I've seen it when I read about something horrible happening, some horrible random crime, and then I read like, oh, actually, it wasn't totally random. Like if I can find some part of my brain that can say, oh, this victim was not blameless, there's a sense of relief. So, seeing my father and mother suffer greatly with something that they are utterly blameless for, and with the knowledge that the suffering will almost certainly increase as his Alzheimer's progresses. Yeah, that costs me something. That costs me this treasured, cherished, again, juvenile, childlike belief in a just, fair universe. Man, I'm having a lot of throat problems too. All right. I think this is my body's way of saying it's time to wrap this one up. So I did come to San Francisco. I'm here. I got here late last night. But I was kind of a mess. Yeah, I sobbed yesterday morning. And then throughout the day, even on the plane, I was crying intermittently. And feeling this real sense of brokenness. Broken, that I'm broken. I mean, again, the OCD didn't take over. It didn't take over. But still, I was very, very uncomfortable sticking with this decision. It was very painful. And that makes me feel like broken, because yeah, why should it be so painful? But also this feeling of, it reminds me a little bit of when my grandmother died. This feeling of, nothing really matters. It doesn't matter whether I achieve the success I hope for with my career. It doesn't matter what happens with Anna, because there's this deep loss with my grandmother and now with my father. And there's something liberating in that too. In just going into that feeling of brokenness, that feeling of grief. But it's a lot harder with my father, and not just because he's my father, but because it's obviously not purely grief. I'm not mourning him, he's still here. And yeah, for a lot of the time on the plane, my brain was saying, you made a mistake, you should have stayed there. You made a mistake, you should have stayed there. And I'm just, not engaging with the thoughts, but it's still not pleasant. But last night, sleeping with Anna, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to keep repeating it. Things are just perfect. Her body next to the bed, next to me in bed, the heat coming off her. She sleeps fully clothed generally. I sleep naked. We have different sort of internal temperatures. But what I get is I get her calves and her feet. And just stroking her calves and feet. And inhaling her smell. And I think that's part of why I wanted to come back, was this awareness at some level that, okay, this is a heavy loss right now with my dad. And I want comfort. And what a wonderful thing it is that this person can give me comfort. Pure comfort. She's just there for me. And she doesn't even have to do anything. Just being in her presence is incredibly comforting. And so yeah, grief and praise. I'm seeing it in everything. The better things get with Anna, the more there'll also be this grief that, you can't cling to anything. And as I grieve my dad, there's this praise of what a wonderful, loving, just great father he was. And so I'm grateful. This was, I couldn't have asked for a better Thanksgiving.